Welcome to the introduction of the principles of management. This is Chapter 1. Section 1.2. Who are managers? In this video, we need to stay focused on our learning objectives. And our learning objectives are, to understand what it means to be a manager, to understand the various types of managers, and also to recognize the nature of managerial work. Who are managers? We often think of managers in terms of their position in an organization. This reveals some information about their role and the nature of their responsibilities. In contrast to the traditional, hierarchical relationship between layers of management and managers and employees, top managers, through a process known as empowerment, support and serve other managers and employees, just as the organization ultimately exists, to serve its customers and clients. Empowerment is the process of enabling or authorizing a person to think, behave, take action, and control work and decision-making autonomously. However, different types of managers are still required, in both traditional and contemporary management perspectives. Top executives are in charge of developing the organization's strategy and acting as stewards of its vision and mission. The second group of managers consists of functional, team, and general managers. Functional managers are in charge of an area's efficiency and effectiveness, such as accounting or marketing. Supervisory or team managers are in charge of coordinating a subgroup of a specific function, or a team made up of members from various parts of the organization. Line managers and staff managers are sometimes distinguished. A line manager oversees a function that directly contributes to the organization's products or services. For example, at Procter & Gamble, a line manager, also known as a product or service manager, is in charge of the production, marketing, and profitability of the Tide detergent product line. A staff manager, on the other hand, is in charge of a function that generates indirect inputs. Finance and accounting, for example, are critical organizational functions but do not typically contribute to the final product or service that a customer purchases, such as a box of Tide detergent. They instead play a supporting role. A project manager is in charge of the planning, execution, and completion of any project. Project managers are frequently found in the fields of construction, architecture, consulting, computer networking, telecommunications, and software development. A general manager is in charge of a clearly identifiable revenue-generating unit, such as a store, business unit, or product line. General managers are typically required to make decisions across multiple functions and are compensated based on the overall unit's performance, that is, store, business unit, product line, and etc. General managers are guided by their top executives. They must first comprehend the executive's overall business strategy. Then, in order to fit into the plan, they establish specific goals for their respective departments. For example, the general manager of production may need to expand certain product lines, while discontinuing others. General managers must communicate their objectives to their support staff in a clear and concise manner. Supervisory managers ensure that the objectives are met. Please take a moment to look at the diagram. The diagram shows the differences between traditional and contemporary management. It is the changing roles of management and managers. Let's take a look at the characteristics of managerial work. Managers are accountable for the processes of efficiently completing activities, with and through other people, as well as setting and achieving the firm's goals, through the execution of 4 basic management functions: planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Both processes make use of human, financial, and material resources. Of course, some managers are more effective than others at this. Several studies on what managers actually do have been conducted, the most famous of which was conducted by Professor Henry Mintzberg in the early 1970s. One explanation for Mintzberg's enduring influence is that, aside from the shift to an empowered relationship between top managers and other managers and employees, and obvious changes in technology, and the exponential increase in information overload, the nature of managerial work has changed very little since that time. Mintzberg concluded after following managers around for several weeks, that managers take on multiple roles, in order to meet the many demands of performing their functions. A role is an organized set of behaviors, and Mintzberg identified 10 roles that all managers must perform. The 10 roles are divided into 3 categories: interpersonal, informational, and decisional. The informational roles connect all managerial work. Interpersonal roles ensure that information is communicated. The information is heavily used in decision-making roles. The performance of managerial roles and the requirements of these roles can be performed at different times and to varying degrees by the same manager, depending on the level and function of management. The 10 roles are described individually, but they work together to form a whole. The 3 interpersonal roles are all about interpersonal relationships. In the role of figurehead, the manager represents the organization in all formal matters. Outside of the organization, the top-level manager represents the company legally and socially. The supervisor represents the work group to higher management, and higher management represents the work group to higher management. The manager's role as a liaison involves interacting with peers, as well as people outside of the organization. The liaison role is used by the top-level manager to gain favors and information, while the supervisor uses it to keep the workflow on track. The manager-employee relationship is defined by the leader role. Please take a moment to look at the diagram. The diagram shows the 3 interpersonal roles. The 10 managerial roles by Professor Henry Mintzberg. Because of the manager's direct relationships with people in interpersonal roles, he or she is in a unique position to obtain information. As a result, the 3 informational roles are predominantly concerned with the informational aspects of managerial work. The manager receives and collects information in the monitor role. The manager's role as a disseminator is to transmit special information throughout the organization. The supervisor receives and transmits more information from people outside the organization than the top-level manager. The manager's role as a spokesperson is to disseminate information about the organization to its surroundings. As a result, the top-level manager is regarded as an industry expert, whereas the supervisor is regarded as a unit or departmental expert. Because of the manager's unique access to information, he or she is at the center of organizational decision-making. Managers have 4 decision-making roles. The manager initiates change in the entrepreneur role. The manager in the disturbance handler role deals with threats to the organization. The manager chooses where the organization's efforts will be directed as a resource allocator. The manager negotiates on behalf of the organization in the role of negotiator. The top-level manager makes decisions for the entire organization, while the supervisor makes decisions for his or her specific work unit. The supervisor fulfills these managerial responsibilities, but with a different emphasis than higher-level managers. Supervisory management is more focused and has a shorter time horizon. As a result, the figurehead role becomes less important for the supervisor, while the roles of disturbance handler and negotiator become more important. Because leadership pervades all activities, the leader role is one of the most important at all levels of management. So, what do Mintzberg's findings about the nature of managerial work imply for you? On the one hand, managerial work is the lifeblood of most organizations, because it choreographs and motivates individuals to do extraordinary things. Managerial work is exciting, and it is difficult to imagine a time when capable, energetic managers will be in short supply. Managerial work, on the other hand, is inherently fast-paced and fragmented, with managers at all levels expressing the belief that they must process far more information and make far more decisions than they could have ever imagined. So, just as the most successful organizations appear to have well-formed and well-executed strategies, managers must also have good strategies for how they will approach their work. This is exactly what management principles will teach you. Congratulations! You are now at the end of the presentation. Let's take a look at the key takeaway. Managers are in charge of completing tasks through the efforts of others. The key managerial functions are typically defined as planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. The definitions for each of these have evolved over time, as has the nature of management in general. This evolution is most visible in the gradual shift from the traditional hierarchical relationship between managers and employees to a climate better described as an upside-down pyramid, in which top executives support middle managers, who in turn support the employees who innovate and meet the needs of customers and clients. Managers perform 10 different roles across all 4 managerial functions, ranging from figurehead to negotiator. While actual managerial work may appear difficult, the skills you gain through management principles, which include the functions of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, will help you meet these challenges.